Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. Backstory. A couple of years back, my girlfriend Samantha moved into a new apartment closer to her sister and me. Setting up internet was a priority, but she wanted to ensure the Wi-Fi was secure. Despite being somewhat tech-savvy, she double-checked with the provider about default passwords. They assured her everything would be secure out of the box and that connecting devices would be a breeze. The incident. After a few months, Samantha noticed her internet speed slowing down, especially during video calls with her family overseas. Knowing the issue could stem from her laptop, network cables, or the internet itself, she asked for my help before contacting tech support. As a seasoned IT professional with over 15 years of experience, I relished the chance to flaunt my skills. It didn't take long to uncover the culprit. Someone was piggybacking on her Wi-Fi. While the staff was right about no default admin password, they had overlooked a glaring flaw. The Wi-Fi password was the same as the randomly generated network name. I was livid at this disregard for privacy and incompetence. The retaliation? I suggested upgrading to a professional-grade router like the one I used at home, allowing us to set up a secure VPN and enjoy features like private VoIP. Samantha agreed, and we split the cost for a top-tier XL model. Before the new router arrived, I enabled Wi-Fi logging and plugged in a large USB drive to the existing one, intending to gather evidence. Then, I set up a hidden Wi-Fi network for Samantha with robust security. Next, I created a second, throttled network mimicking the old one and implemented custom DNS overrides. Certain websites frequented by the squatters now redirected to explicit content without consent. A popular banking site led to a relationship counseling page with the tagline, "When you think your spouse is cheating on you, come to us." To top it off, I found a randomizer feature that occasionally displayed a disturbingly graphic image from the early internet days. The infamous Swedish goat meme. Samantha had mixed feelings about my actions, but she understood my protective instincts and agreed that trespassers forfeit their rights to civil treatment. The aftermath. One day, Samantha returned home to find a moving van outside. Her neighbor 2 doors down was relocating amid heated arguments audible through the walls. Apparently, the couple had an explosive fallout over their questionable browsing habits, exacerbated by the redirected content. One party even accused the other of hacking the internet when the disturbing images appeared. Their relationship didn't survive the ordeal. I have no regrets. After removing the rogue network, DNS overrides, and forwarding rules, everything returned to normal. Samantha remains thrilled with the new router and the secure backup solution for her 3D art projects. Remember, using someone else's internet connection is a privilege, not a right. It could easily be abused to compromise your data or finances. Don't take that risk. The next one is an entitled people story. I've lived in my house for over 20 years, ever since I bought the place right after college. It's nothing too fancy, just a modest single-family home on a quarter-acre lot in a nice suburban neighborhood. I have great neighbors on both sides who I've become good friends with over the years. We look out for each other, help with little projects here and there, and overall have a very neighborly relationship. About 5 years ago, the house across the street went up for sale. I hoped we'd get another friendly family to move in, but unfortunately that wasn't meant to be. Right from the start, I could tell the new owner, Karen, was going to be trouble. She strutted around with her nose in the air, inspecting every inch of her new property with a judgmental look on her face. I tried to welcome her to the neighborhood when she first moved in, but she just frowned at me and went back to scribbling notes on her clipboard. Okay, not the warm and friendly type, I figured. It wasn't long before Karen started sticking her nose where it didn't belong. She seemed determined to improve our neighborhood by imposing all kinds of new rules and restrictions. I first noticed when she started hassling my next-door neighbor about his collection of garden gnomes. She claimed they violated homeowner association guidelines on lawn decorations. The thing is, we don't have an homeowner association. When my neighbor pointed this out, she huffed and stormed off in a rage. This was just the beginning of Karen's crusade. Next, she came after my other neighbor for parking his work truck in his own driveway overnight. She left threatening notices taped to his garage door citing non-existent homeowner association parking regulations. She even called to have it towed once. Thankfully, the tow truck driver realized the situation and refused to take it. It wasn't long before Karen set her sights on me. The first issue was my backyard pool. I installed it a few years ago so I could swim laps and my friends and I could enjoy summer pool parties. One Saturday afternoon, Karen came stomping over and demanded I drain the pool immediately because it was violating homeowner association safety codes. I calmly explained that not only was there no homeowner association, but my pool met all city safety requirements and was properly permitted. Well, that sent her into a screaming rage. She yelled that she was the homeowner association president and I had to do what she said before stomping back to her house in a huff. The pool confrontation put Karen and I into all-out war. Over the next few weeks, she constantly harassed me every time I used my pool or had people over to swim. She would stand at the edge of her property and take photos while yelling threats to have my pool membership revoked. What pool membership? I repeatedly told her to get off my property and leave me alone, but she refused to listen. The last straw was when I came home to find Karen lurking in my backyard with a long pole in her hand. I yelled at her to get away from my pool, but she just sneered and said she was performing a safety inspection. We ended up getting into a shouting match that ended with her threatening to press charges before she finally left. That did it. The next time Karen set foot on my property, I was calling the cops. I didn't have to wait long. The very next weekend, Karen was back, standing in my yard yelling for me to turn my music down. I immediately pulled out my phone and called 911 while telling Karen she was trespassing and the police were on their way. It gave me great satisfaction to watch the cops march Karen off my property while she screamed about revoking my pool membership. I showed the officers all the documentation proving I wasn't part of any homeowner association and had the proper permits for my pool. They made it clear to Karen that she was the one out of line. The police warned Karen to leave me and my property alone or she'd be arrested for harassment and trespassing. That finally got through her thick skull. After that, whenever I saw her outside, she would quickly scurry back into her house while shooting dirty looks at me. I ended up installing security cameras and no trespassing signs just to be safe. Thankfully, I haven't had any more issues with her since. So the moral of the story is don't mess with someone on their own property, especially when you falsely claim authority you don't have. This Karen learned her lesson the hard way when I called the cops and had her removed from my backyard. Maybe someday she'll accept that she's just an ordinary neighbor like the rest of us, not the supreme homeowner association president she imagines herself to be. Until then, I'll be sure to keep a close eye on her anytime I use my pool, just in case she gets any more crazy ideas about trying to control what happens in my yard. The next one is a petty revenge story. This happened 20 years ago when my kids were in elementary school. We lived in a wonderful neighborhood with walking access to school used regularly by the community. My eldest was in upper elementary, youngest in early grades. Eldest was getting harassed by some neighbor kids on the walk to and from school. The harassers were in the same grade range and brothers. Eldest talked about what was going on and we workshopped ways they could address it. Nothing worked. I talked about the issue with a next door neighbor friend. It was a sensitive circumstance, being neighbors and all. I called the mom of the harassers to talk about it. No hate. I wasn't accusing. It was a conversation. She shut me down with I don't want to get involved in what happens on the walk home. Alrighty then. I thanked her for her time and we hung up. I tried to address the issue by getting home early enough to meet up with the kids at school to walk them home, but I was working and couldn't do that all the time. So the harassing happened, and conversations with eldest and next-door neighbor continued. Kids were around, we were addressing it as a global issue and being developmentally sensitive. This stuff happens, how do we resolve it respectfully? Then, one day when I didn't meet them but had arrived home soon after school let out, there was a ruckus. Youngest child and her friend, next-door neighbor's eldest, same age as my youngest, had chased the harassing brothers home from school, throwing rocks at them all the way to their front door, and their message to the brothers was, "Leave eldest alone." I figured out my kids and neighbor girl and got them settled, and then my phone rang. Back in that time, we had landlines and caller ID, and I saw that it was other neighbor, mother of the harassing brothers. I smiled. I did. I'm not entirely proud of it. I pushed the button and put the phone to my ear and said hello. I really don't remember what she said. I listened until she was finished, and then I said, "I don't want to get involved in what happens on the walk home." She paused a long time, and we sat in that silence, and then she said, "Fair enough," and we hung up. Those brothers never bothered eldest or youngest or neighbor kid ever again. Youngest remains terrifying to this day. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I was swing expediter / scheduler / shop assistant. I didn't run the machines, I just helped get done what needed to be done on our shift. Had an old school machinist come in at start of shift and explain the blueprint was wrong, and if he followed the attached manufacturing procedure, it was going to result in a bad part. He showed me the issue, and I agreed right away. Said I'd catch the engineer before shift the next day. Call engineer, he says. It's right, just do it. Call him again next day, same result. Move it up a level, and he storms into our office pissed off on third day. I try and show him the drawing and procedure, but he insists it's correct. He tells me I have no idea what we are doing in our shop, just follow the procedure as it's written. I had logged all of the calls, etc., and asked if he would put that in writing, and he does. QMC. I go to same machinist, tell him the issue. It's a 16-hour job. He sits and reads for 2 days and then hands paperwork, no part, into quality control. They check measurements and confirm it was manufactured correctly. They ask what's going on. Where is the part? I come by and explain that according to both the drawing and procedure, the machinist was to machine a 12-inch part down to just over 13 inches shorter than it started at. Thus, the produced product, nothing. Usual ask about why did we do this. I showed them the records I had, so they wrote it up as a procedure issue. 2 days later, same engineer storms in, but brought his boss, the one I initially went to when I got no response, and starts accusing me of sabotaging his part. I calmly show both of them everything, explain that we knew it was an issue and tried to fix it, but we were overridden. Boss looks at engineer and says, "Why aren't you listening to people that are trying to help?" And the engineer replies, "They didn't go to college to become an engineer. They don't know what they are talking about," and walks out. I look at boss and he says, "We will get you a revised procedure and drawing. I assume you still actually have the original stock to make it from?" I laughed and told him I wasn't stupid. Of course I do. Engineer was no longer with the firm a couple weeks later. The next one is an entitled people's story. Years ago I had a job that I loved, but it was a dead end, so I decided to change jobs. But before that, I met this older woman. She was in her late 30s, early 40s, and I was on my mid-20s, who worked on the same building but for a different employer. She seemed pretty cool. We used to hang out when we could, and she said she'd love to work with me someday. Then she got fired, and we stopped talking, but just for timing. She had told me all her previous jobs had ended badly, but she also explained why it was always unfair. I was young and admired her, so I believed her. I even helped her get her stuff back because when she got fired, it was on bad terms and she wouldn't be allowed in the building anymore, but I never got the details of that. I found another job after that, then got another at the same time and lived my life quite happily. COVID hit and I lost one of my jobs. I found a very low-paying one and started to get desperate for money. I remembered my friend from back then and thought she could give me some advice and moral support. I never thought she would offer me a job because of her history, but she did. Not super well paid, but better than my other second job. So I did the math, and with those two salaries, I'd be fine again, and I quit the low-paying job. She is the president of a nonprofit foundation with a business partner, and I was going to be the third person on the team. The day I started the new position with her, she told me she did her math wrong. She could only pay me a very low amount, lower than my previous job, almost minimum wage. She also never hired me, so she never paid for Social Security at all. In my country, your employer adds an amount towards that. So I was stuck there, really struggling with money, but at least the job was super fun, challenging, and I was working with a friend, so that was good. She paid my salary on time the first 2 months. Then, every end of the month, she would start crying, literally, about her own financial status, how she had no money at all, and she could only pay me a part of it now, and the rest later. She did that, but still not the ideal situation. The rest of the month, she would have her nails done, go to expensive parties, go out on vacations, lend money to her business partner who had a drug problem, etc. Things started to get worse every month, but I never thought a friend would screw me over on purpose. Until then, I felt sorry for her. How silly of me. She had started to use money from her family-in-law without them knowing, and they started to get suspicious. I think that's how she managed to pay me, but she never said with all the words, just vague implications. We were working on a project for a big company, and after the first delivery, the company said there were many errors in our proposal. We checked, and it was all on the things she had done, but she yelled and blamed it on me. That's when it clicked in my head. My part wasn't even relevant for that part of the process yet. I asked her to stop yelling at me and to please explain what she needed from me because she wasn't being clear and I wasn't the one in charge of the faulty parts, so I wasn't sure of how to fix that. She just started to yell even more, now saying she had a friend in my same field check my work and it was incomplete. It really was because I needed her part to finish mine and she would keep changing it. That was a Friday, so I told her I was going to keep working from home. We could talk on Monday. Monday came and I went to the office. She wasn't there. I tried calling her and no response. I texted her that we needed to talk before I started working, but she replied she was at the company we were working for, which I knew was impossible for a number of reasons. I told her I quit and I was taking all social media accounts' passwords with me until she paid me my full salary. The week before, she was crying about not having money, but this time I got the money right away, so I gave her the passwords. And that's how I learned that just because someone is your friend, that doesn't mean it's a good idea to let the important things go. The next one is an entitled parent story. My parents are first-gen kids from immigrant parents. For context, they met when they were 17 and 18 and have been together ever since. Growing up in a cultural house and being the oldest child, 19F, my parents were extremely strict with me, and I feared for my life around them. I was not allowed to have friends, let alone boyfriends. Bringing a guy over my house would have been my worst nightmare. This led me to not really take interest in boys or boyfriends and kind of mind my own business, which they were very happy about when I was in high school. I have grown to be a very attractive woman, to the point that every guy I have ever been friends with had liked me or tried something at some point, and I have lost many close friends due to jealousy. I notice, but I don't really care. I am not interested in anyone, and I don't care to have a boyfriend. Now that I am a little older and in college, the script has flipped completely. My parents want me to start dating and find a guy to marry. When we are at cultural events, guys will introduce themselves and talk to my dad, trying to get in good with him. My dad tries to get me to talk to them, but I just don't want to. I am just not interested. These guys are very good looking and respectable, but I just don't really care. I don't know if I am interested in marriage or having children, and I think it worries my parents. It is culturally traditional to get married sorta young and have children. This just doesn't interest me, and I want to selfishly live my life. I think that being so pushed away from engaging in romantic relationships by my parents when I was younger really affected me now. The fact that they changed their perspective on me dating so quickly too just really turns me off. Maybe I will want a relationship at some point, but it honestly makes me feel good to tell them no and turn down every guy. I genuinely am not interested, but I also feel like it is in spite. They believe that I need to marry a guy from our culture and have children, which part of me wants, but the other part of me resents the idea, and I don't know why. I know that I am free to make my own choices and live my life the way I want, but their words have a bigger impact on me than I'd like, and I think about this a lot. The next one is an entitled parent's story. I was making donuts for the first time. My mom was there, but she just watched. She never made donuts herself. She doesn't really bake. While frying, I burned my hand a few times, and it was really painful. When I told this to her, she just laughed and made jokes that I fried my hand. This made me feel really hurt, but I wonder if I'm just overreacting. Truth is, I'm quite the clumsy person myself, so it might also have been my fault, but I tried to be as careful as possible. Keep in mind, whenever my mom tells me that she has a headache or her back hurts, I never laugh at her. Also, she always tells me I shouldn't keep my pain to myself. Not just physical, but mental and emotional as well. But why would I tell her if I will just get dismissed? That's why I'm mainly mad about this, because of the hypocrisy. This is also what happens with mental health problems and trauma. She tells me I should talk about my problems and feelings, but then she always goes about how others have it so much worse. I suffered much more than you. You don't know what it's like to suffer. You're just pretending. You're just lazy, etc. That's why I never talk about my problems to her. And then she wonders why. Even as a child, I always kept it to myself if I was injured. I never told my mom, even if it was very painful. Now I wonder, I don't have clear memories of this, but is it possible that my mom also laughed at me or dismissed my pain when I was a child, and that's why I developed the habit to pretend that I'm fine even when I'm not? Also, when she found out about my self-harm, she also laughed at me when we made something in the kitchen, stating that if I accidentally cut myself with the machine, it wouldn't matter to me anyways. Yes, it would. Also, she cried about it and made it all about herself, that I'm only doing it to make her feel bad and because I hate her. She also called my scars ugly. I want opinions because I'm afraid I might just be overreacting and being overly sensitive. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.